Good morning, everyone. I hope you are well. Lovely to see you, Carol, Peter, and Michael, and Richard, and everyone else who are still joining us. Apologies for the slightly late start. We're doing at the moment a Sefer Torah project in the shul, in which we hope to be able to renew our Sifrei Torah, upgrade them, and therefore, obviously, sorry, I am in a slightly different location, having taken one Sefer Torah and brought back another. Today's learning is dedicated in memory of all those that the Yortzeit for today, as well as all those that we have been saying and learning over the course of the last year. I apologize, I don't have the names to hand. Good morning also Estelle and everyone else who are joining us. One of the most difficult aspects of this period is the ability to relate to something that was 2,000 years ago. And I'm going to hopefully discuss in a couple of minutes about how we can make it more meaningful and how we can relate to a period of a mourning for the destruction of a building which occurred some 2,000 years ago. So the first point, before we come to that, I just want to discuss very briefly one idea in the Sedra, in the Parsha. Everyone must be very happy. Is David Goldring here? I don't think he's here yet, but I'm sure everyone is relieved, happy after yesterday's success. It took 55 years. You know, all things come to those that wait. So all the England supporters are very happy for the time being. And that's also something, life's full of disappointments. But if you don't, take risks and make yourself, in a sense, vulnerable, then you'll never see what you're capable of. It's one of the lessons from last night. So that's that. Now, in Parshas Pinchas, we're told that every day the Jews were expected to bring a daily sacrifice in the morning and in the evening, what's called the Korban Tamid. Now, what's interesting is that it says at the end of it, you have to bring it, and it mentions the phrase, as was done at Sinai. And the question, friends, is obvious. Every mitzvah, every command, everything comes from Sinai. Everything that we have was part of our Masoric tradition from Sinai. So why is this pointed out? And the answer is obvious. If you do something every single day, morning and night, there is a tendency that after a while, it's going to become a matter of rote. It's going to become a matter of habit. The enthusiasm, the passion, the excitement is going to dissipate very, very quickly. And therefore, it's for that reason we started doing mitzvot at Sinai. That was the first occasion. It was like when you become bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, or just after the wedding. It's that newness, that freshness, and that was the feeling and sentiment then. So we are commanded, when we bring a daily sacrifice, day in, day out, week after week, year after year, we are commanded, make sure you do so the same way as when you brought it at Sinai. At Sinai, it was fresh. You were excited. You were enthusiastic. You brought it with passion and dedication and devotion. So it is that whenever you bring this daily sacrifice, even if it's many years later, that's the way you should approach it. How often do we find in life that we become rather what they call nowadays burned out? We lose that zest, that excitement for life. We lose that joie de vivre, and one of the reasons we do is because it becomes a matter of rote and habit. And the way to get round that in life, and this is a message for life in general that I struggle with, and I'm sure we all do, is quite simply, it's by making sure that every time you do it, it's not the same. Even though it is the same, you make it like it's not the same. And therefore, when I deepen my understanding about a mitzvah, or when I find another aspect to show appreciation to my family or to my wife, wherever it is, in every sphere and area of life, if I am able to find newness, then it's like I'm at Sinai. It's like I'm starting afresh, starting anew, and therefore I will be naturally full of enthusiasm and excitement. Even with prayer, it's so easy. You have a fresh look at any type of passage that we read, any psalm, and you look at the commentaries or you look online and you'll find some beautiful English explanations. And it is so easy to have a fresh appreciation, to be able to internalize those messages. All of a sudden you are full of life, full of excitement and vitality. Message number one. Okay, you ready for one more? One more. Okay, before this is the calm before the storm for today. I think it's a bit manic. Okay, and by the way, I am not Gareth Southgate. People think if I wear a waistcoat, I look like Gareth Southgate. I don't look like him. I don't sound like him. He's not a cousin and not even a brother. Okay, so the following idea. The temple was destroyed 2,000 years ago. Okay, now for most of us, it is something that is something of the past. It is very hard for us to be able to relate to it. It is something which seems rather abstract, historic, right? So how do we relate to something that happened 2,000 years ago? I think we mentioned before the story of Napoleon Bonaparte that heard the wailing in a certain synagogue, and he asked one of his officers to find out why it is that there was wailing, and he came back and said the Jews are mourning over the destruction of their temple. And he says, well, when was that? They said that was 2,000 years ago. Napoleon said, if they are still mourning over something 2,000 years ago, it means that they will merit to see it rebuilt, because it's something real, not something prehistoric. And with there's an amazing story about, because if we look at all the ills in society and we look at all the things that are wrong and we start to think about it, the injustices, the racism, the superficiality of society, so many different areas of wrong and injustice and inequality. And one of the messages is for us to take on board is that all of that, these are just symptoms of an underlying cause. And that is what the temple represents. Not the temple itself, but what the temple represents. Let me explain. We're not the best of builders, let's face it. Jews don't know how to build. But one thing we did know how to build, and that was the temple. Okay? It's an extraordinary accomplishment. But surely in today's day and age, Michael, it will be, good morning, it would be quite easy for us to be able to get construction workers and get them down and build the temple again. Why don't we do it? We've built the rest of Israel. Do you know why? The answer is quite simple. It's because the temple was never just a pile of bricks and cement. The temple took on a life of its own when the divine presence rested within it. And that was the only way that the Romans and the Babylonians were able to destroy the temple, was because that divine presence left. Then it just became bricks and mortar that can be destroyed. But when that divine presence is there, right, is dwelling amongst our midst in the temple, then it is something sublime, something transcendent. And there's an amazing story about Jeremiah and Plato. Plato, of course, was one of the great philosophers, and he came to Jerusalem after the destruction of the temple, and he notices that Jeremiah, the great prophet of Israel, and the great philosopher, world-renowned and respected, and he's sitting on the pile of stones, the remnants of the temple, crying, bawling his eyes out. Plato comes up to him and he looks at him in disgust and contempt and disappointment. He says, Jeremiah, you're renowned as one of the greatest philosophers, one of the great thinkers of our generation. You're sitting and crying over a pile of bricks and mortar. Deal. So Jeremiah turned to Plato and he said to him, tell me the three most difficult existential, philosophical questions that you have had that remain unanswered. Plato thought a moment and then he shared with Jeremiah the three questions that he had that he never was able to find answers to. And in one split second, the questions that had grappled Plato the whole of his life, Jeremiah was able to answer. And Plato asked him, he says, Mai-hai, how did you manage to do that? That's astounding. You're a genius. I knew, but this is something else. Jeremiah said, it wasn't me. The answers came from what used to dwell in the midst of that temple. And with that, Plato sat down next to Jeremiah and they both cried. Because, friends, what we have lost is not bricks and mortar that we can rebuild. It's that close relationship with God. In a way, it's the soul of the Jewish people. Because when the Shekhinah when the divine presence was living amongst us, then there was this clarity of vision. There was, in a sense, a tranquility. There was, in a sense, a peace of mind, of body, and there was, everyone was heading, the whole world was heading in a certain direction. We all had a recognition and realization that God is running the world, that we have a purpose in life, that we're meant to act in a godly fashion, we're meant to be considerate to one another, and so on and so forth. And it's with the destruction of the temple comes greater confusion, comes the deceit, the falsehood, the lies, the violence, the injustices. That's all represented by the destruction of the temple and the removal of the divine presence. And therefore, they say that anybody that doesn't mourn over the destruction of the temple will never see it rebuilt. If you don't miss something, then why should you merit to have it again? And the idea is that what we are meant to do is we're meant to, as in, any type of endeavor, if things don't go right, what do? Rather than play the blame game, you do a holistic review of all the areas that were coming together and were meant to work together. And you are able to dissect and to diagnose where the problem lies and thereby put it right so that it doesn't reoccur. If there's something wrong with a car, right, as was with my car, you take it in and then they put it right. And then they smile, give you the keys, and they give you a nice big bill. That's the way it works. So it is that when it comes to the temple, we know what's wrong. If the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, because of mindless hatred, because people didn't respect another person, someone different to themselves, right? Somebody who looked different to themselves, who a different way of life to themselves, then that is still the problem today. If it's not rebuilt, we're still suffering from the same malady. And therefore, it's up to each and every one of us, friends, in short, to, during this 3-week period, to use it to the max and to consider our lives and how perhaps we can be that little bit more thoughtful, more engaged, more connected, more spiritual, more sensitive, and more considerate. And in that way, please God, we will all merit to see a rebuilt Jerusalem where there will be peace and harmony in our day, not just for the Jewish people, but the world at large. Have a great day. Please God, we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.